Mindfulness just is, it's, here's one of the Thich Nhat Hanh's quotes. He says, "Walk as if you are kissing the earth with your feet." It's a practice of putting your mind and your consciousness onto exactly where you are in the moment and being able to find beauty. It's one of the great teachings that I learned as a young man is that looking at beauty in the world is the very first step in purifying the mind. To be able to find beauty. I remember the story I told of Viktor Frankl when I was with him in 1978 on a panel in Vienna. The great Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and he said that they would give. We had lunch after that, just the two of us. I was very, very touched, and it was one of the most memorable moments of my life. And he said to me, when we were given a bowl of dirty water with a floating fish head in it, and that was our protein for the day. And he said you had to be able to find a way to find beauty in that. He said when we're challenged with circumstances over which we have absolutely no control, that we're challenged to change ourselves. And instead of looking at this as poor me and this shouldn't be happening and isn't this awful, but looking at it in terms of this is where I am. This is where I am in this moment. And in this moment, I'm going to find beauty in this and be in a state of appreciation for this fish, for it's giving its life to me. It's allowing me to survive and so on. And he said he told me, and I'll never forget this, he said the people in the concentration camps, this was in Auschwitz, in Poland, he said the people who couldn't find beauty in the circumstances that they were in, the horrible circumstances that they were in, he said they would always perish. He said, you've got to be able to see beauty. The famous line from John Keats in Ode on a Grecian Urn, beauty is truth, and truth is beauty. That's all you need to know on earth. That's all you know on earth, and all you need to know. And so that this ability, and that's what mindfulness is. It's walking on the earth and kissing the ground with your feet with each step that you take and becoming aware of it. He talks frequently about being able to find beauty in just drying a dish. Yeah, a lot of people sit down, and while they're while they're sitting down for a meal, they're already thinking about what they're going to have for dessert, and instead of just being there in this moment. If this is the appetizer and this is the bite that I'm taking, and this is what I'm tasting in this moment, and to find beauty in virtually everything that there is in you. It's this way of making the mind pure.
Every beauty which is seen here below, down here below, by persons of perception resembles more than anything else that celestial source from which we all come. Isn't that great? Every beauty that we see resembles more than anything else that source. We're talking about source, connecting to source, from which we all come. Do you see beauty? Do you see it more or less in your life? Can you find it in a homeless person urinating on the street? Can you find beauty in a cockroach? As you reach higher levels of consciousness, you begin to see, not only do you see beauty everywhere and in everything, you begin to recognize it as truth.
And, you can look around, whoever you are, listening, wherever you are on this planet right now, look out your window or look to your right or look to your left, wherever you are, in a little room someplace or sitting on a beach somewhere or driving in your car or whatever it may be, and just look around. What I want to say to all of you is that, the very first step in purifying your mind and moving into higher levels of consciousness and recognizing the eternal, infinite consciousness that you are, is to look at beauty in the world and see it in as many places as you can. And if you're a writer, you write a poem about it. I mean, there's 3 or 4 poems in there right now that and if Rumi were here listening, and maybe he is, maybe that was Rumi, because I have such a love affair with his poetry. Maybe it was Rumi walking across my balcony on the railing, saying, "Find beauty in me." Just one of the strangest experiences that I've had, and that all came from Thich Nhat Hanh. And since we had that experience, and since I was reading him this week, I've been finding beauty in everything, in every little bird that flies by, and every person that's out there, and every wave that shows up, and so on.
Let me share with you from my heart. I have 6 daughters and 2 sons, but I have a 16-year-old daughter, the only child that we have, who has taken a different path in her life. And we've struggled with it. And she had a very serious automobile accident. She had to be cut out of the car. She has taken a path of drinking and experimenting in drugs and so on. And I know that this is a path, and it's a very painful path, and she's had some very difficult times with it, and she's got a whole thing about authority and doing things her own way and so on, and I understand it because I've lived it my whole life. And every time, I must say that in the last 3 or 4 months there's been just incredibly dramatic shifts in our life, and it's because there has been a shift in how I and my wife are dealing with this. And I used to, when I would think about her, I would be filled with rage and filled with pain. And I would be tearful, and I'd be angry at the dumb choices that she would make and the things that she would do that just didn't seem to make sense. And I don't know if you've raised teenage daughters, but I saw a wonderful title for a book about raising teenage daughters. It said, "Get Out of My Life." That was the title. But first, drive me and Cheryl to the mall. All right? It's a great book, by the way. And so I would be in my mind, and I'd be thinking about it, and I would try meditating, and I'd try working on it, and so on. And nothing seemed to work. And then I began to study this Foundations of Mysticism, this series of lectures by Joel Goldsmith, this great healer, lived back in the 1950s, wrote the Parentheses in Eternity and the Infinite Way. Wonderful, wonderful readings. He was a Christian Scientist and a very big supporter of chiropractic as well. And he talked about how we nullify disorder, disease, disharmony, and so on. And that, a reminder, the Spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing. These words that I say unto you are spirit. And he said, getting down on your knees and asking God to heal you, or getting down on your knees and asking God to grant you abundance where scarcity resides, getting down on your knees and asking God for anything is a foolish mission. Because the assumption behind asking God to give you something is that God already has it, but he's holding it back. He said, Luke 15:31 says, all that I have is thine. It's all yours already. And you are already connected to all that I have. And God, he said, isn't going to be doing anything different 1 hour from now than God is doing now. And God isn't going to be doing anything different an hour from now than God was doing 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. God is the infinite now. Don't assume that God is a withholding God. If I had the keys to healing you, to giving you abundance, to giving you a great relationship, to providing a job for you, whatever it is that you would like, and I held it all back unless you begged for it or obeyed the rules that I said you must obey, you would say, you're really not even a very nice person, let alone a very nice God. He said you must know that you're connected to it already, and that the disease, the disharmony, the discord will be nullified, will be wiped out when you bring spirit to it. And as I would think about my daughter and the rage, I would feel myself as I was plugged into the physical, the laws of the material. And I would, in my own mind, I would unplug myself from the material, and I would plug myself into God. It's a wonderful mental image when things aren't going the way you would like them to go. Just unplug yourself from the laws of the physical, especially where there's disharmony, disorder, disease, and plug into God. And what you do when you plug into God is you bring love, you bring pardon, you bring hope, you bring joy, you bring fulfillment to that, and you correct the error, and it's gone. I had a friend who was diagnosed with cancer and told that she had just a few months to live. And she knew that she was in disharmony. And she didn't even tell her parents. She didn't tell anyone. She knew what she had to do. She had read all the spiritual literature. She had immersed herself in meditation and deep prayer. But still, she was surrounded by and contaminated by the energy field of those who were living in fear and without faith. And she left and she rented a cabin up in Wisconsin, in northern Wisconsin. And she went there all alone. And in the process, what she knew she had to do for 8 to 10 hours a day, every day, was to just reconnect to her source. And in the process of doing this, of just communing with God, and just bringing peace, she came back from there a cleansed and whole person, and a healed person as well. It is in the bringing of spirit to disease. And that's why I say, and said to you at the very beginning, you must be operating at a different level.
And while I don't think that it's very possible for most of us to ever completely get rid of this ego, as long as we're incarnated into a human form, I do believe that it is possible for us to tame it and to make it less of a dominant force in our lives by no longer having such an important role placed on being right and making other people wrong. One of the ways to begin to work at treasuring your divinity is to practice being kind rather than being right in as many occasions as you possibly can. And you have lots of opportunities to do this on a daily basis. Thousands of them show up in little tiny interactions in virtually every place you go, with strangers, with your children, with your spouses, on the telephone, ordering something in a restaurant, whatever. There's always this part of us that is the ego that wants to be right, that wants to make the dust rise from the earth with your swagger. And after a while, you start noticing it. You start observing it. As your own ego becomes less and less of a dominant force in your life, you start to notice how much other people's ego is playing such a role, how much strutting there is, how much posturing there is, how much bragging takes place. You can see it in body language. You can see it in the way that people deal with each other. You can see it in lines at the grocery store. You can see it when you're trying to get your ticket straightened out at the airport, whatever it might be. There's this placing somebody else in a position of inferiority, and you are here to do this for me, and I'm more important than. And it isn't said that way, but it's sort of communicated. And you think to yourself that all of these people, I do it all the time, all of these people are nothing more than me in an earlier time in my life. That this is the way I was. I see it in my past relationships. I see it in the way that I dealt with my children years ago and the way that I deal with them now. I see it in noticing that it's easier now for me to be kind and to suspend being right. And I'm right almost all the time. But I no longer need to point it out, except for right now, of course. But the idea that even if you know that when you're talking to someone that they're completely wrong, if you can suspend the need to point it out and instead just say something kind back in response. If you can just practice doing that wherever you are, those are points towards treasuring your divinity. It's not about worshiping more. It's not about getting down on your knees and practicing somebody else's orthodoxy. It's not about fitting in. It's not about memorizing verses out of the Bible or the Quran or the Torah or whatever. It's not about that. It's about practicing being Christ-like rather than Christian. It's about practicing being Buddha-like rather than Buddhist. It's about practicing being Muhammad-like rather than Muslim. Muhammad said, don't even harm any tree that has a green leaf growing on it. If there's a green leaf growing on it, don't harm it. Practice that. That kind of love and admiration for humanity. Live as much as you can those principles. And all it amounts to is simply beginning a process of moving out of the lowest levels of consciousness. The lowest level of consciousness is ego consciousness. Ego, some have suggested EGO, is an acronym for edging God out. That as you edge God out of your life, what you have done is you have separated yourself from your divinity, believed that you are those 6 things, separate from everyone, separate from what you would like to attract into your life, separate from God, your reputation. You start believing that this is who you are, and you start living this way, and you look upon your divinity as something that is out there that you'll see, you'll talk to on at the synagogue on Saturday or at church on Sunday morning or whatever. And you'll practice during certain days, like we call, at the end of the year, 30 days of fasting, and this makes me, closer to God and so on. To me, it's about applying the principles of moving past ego consciousness. And when I see conflicts between one group and another, men versus women, when I see conflicts between people who are older and people who are younger, when you see conflicts existing between people who have one color skin and a different color of skin, when you see conflicts between people who wear a robe versus those who wear a yarmulke, when you see all of these divisions, and there are just endless numbers of them that we pigeonhole ourselves into, they are still the cause of virtually all conflicts on the planet. We still are dividing ourselves. We don't understand that this is a round planet, and on a round planet, there's no choosing up sides. There are no sides.